What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blur Without Fear. Welcome back to the channel. Alright, today's video, we're going to be talking about Avengers vs. X-Men vs. Eternals, Judgment Day number 3 by Kieran Gillen and Valerio Schiti. And in this video, I'm going to be breaking down how the new Celestial judges some of Earth's mightiest heroes. We're also going to talk about what could make the core Eternals side with Druig over their Avengers and X-Men allies. We're also going to talk about how Kieran Gillen gives definitive proof that mutants are descended from deviants, and we're also going to be talking about what secret weapon the Eternals have up their sleeve to bring the world together to save everyone from celestial judgment, and also why Earth's mightiest heroes can't just destroy the new Celestial to save the Earth.
You can't see me, you Stevie, wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
Okay, so first things first, let's go ahead and get into the judgments that were rendered during the course of this comic. Now, while not every character in this issue is judged, there are a few who stick out, and one of the first ones is going to be the character of Emma Frost. Now, for those of you who are more familiar with some of the more recent depictions of Emma Frost, going back to Grant Morrison's New X-Men number 114, I would forgive you if you probably forgot about Emma's more villainous past back when she first debuted in 1979's X-Men number 129. Emma never really turned over a more heroic tone until later on in X-Men Volume 2, number 36 in 1994, as well as that same year in Generation X number 1. That is kind of the kickoff point for Emma Frost being less of a villain and more of a hero. Though she has still kind of always remained a more morally gray character, she is, for all intents and purposes, a hero on par with a lot of the other people that you would associate with the X-Men. But that said, she gets a thumbs down here, and I'll talk a little bit more about why she gets that thumbs down here in just a second. I kind of want to bring up some other characters here that also get a thumbs down from the new Celestial, and we'll kind of go over why here in just a moment. But Destiny and Mystique both get a thumbs down in this. Now, you're probably sitting here thinking to yourself, oh, well, yeah, of course, they're bad guys. You wouldn't be wrong. Ever since X-Men number 141 in 1980, Destiny has been a villain largely for most of her publication history. She's had moments where she's come off as less villainous and more morally gray, similar to Emma Frost, but she's never really been an out-and-out hero on a regular basis. The same could be said for the character Mystique, who debuted in Ms. Marvel number 18 back in 1978. She has been a villain pretty much the entirety of her publication history, with very few stints here and there where she's been on the side of good. But that's not why I think either of these characters are being harshly judged, because we have the character Crow, the leader of the Deviants, who's brought up in this issue, and he is given a thumbs up. Now, before anyone screams sexism, I think I know why this is happening. Crow, while leader of the Deviants and had been a villain since Jack Kirby's Eternals number 1, back in 1976, Crow was a bad guy, straight up villain. He was as mustache twirly of a villain as you could get during that initial run up until a certain point. Shortly after his debut in Jack Kirby's Eternals, and within that same run, he started to take on more nuance, and then as the years progressed, he became more and more nuanced from being just a deviant who happened to want peace with the Eternals, but then to becoming more of a character who you realize was more of a hopeless romantic, and pun intended, there were instances where he would deviate back to being more of a mustache twirling villain during the Deviant saga in Robert Roddy's Thor. But he's a person who fights for his people, he fights for his ideals, and he fights for what he believes in. And while he hasn't always been successful, he has led his people to, well, I won't say necessarily peace, but definitely more prosperity than deviants have known in quite some time. And I think that that's the difference. And the reason I feel that way is because of how he judges Captain America. The new Celestial judges Captain America equally as harshly as he does Emma Frost, Destiny, and Mystique. Only in Captain America's case, we actually get an answer for why he was judged that way. The new Celestial believes that Captain America, while yes, he is the symbol of hope and ideals in America and is supposed to be what everyone in the country is supposed to thrive towards, no one really ever does. The country is one that is divided. Everyone kind of seems to do their own thing, and no one really seems to care about upholding the lofty goals that Captain America has set for himself. And if he is supposed to be the symbol of peace, the one that is supposed to inspire everyone, he is literally the sentinel of liberty. If he can't inspire others to uphold the ideals that he has presented, then he has failed in his goals. And I think that kind of takes us back to, Emma Frost and Destiny. This is why they were judged harshly, because for one, Emma Frost has failed on multiple occasions to try and do the right thing. We saw this when she had the Hellions. That complete entire thing broke down in ways that could only be described as catastrophic. And it wasn't really until shortly before forming Generation X, she failed there as well. Not necessarily in the strictest of sense as she did with the Hellions, but the idea is she wasn't able to achieve the goal that she wanted to, and that was to try and build a brighter future for younger mutants. Not only that, she deals with a great deal of imposter syndrome as she expressed during Kieran Gillen's Immortal X-Men. She feels like a failure, even to herself, not just to the rest of the world, and she's trying to put on a good face, a strong face, to make it seem as though she feels otherwise, but it's not true, and she's not true to herself. That's the reason why I feel that she got a thumbs down. In regards to Destiny and Mystique, they have used their powers mostly for their own benefit, and while they have fought for the freedom of other mutants, the thing is they've only fought for other mutants. They're only fighting for one side in this. They're not trying to bridge peace between humans and mutants. They're only trying to secure mutants' place on Earth. Damn everyone else. And I feel like the new Celestial is judging them harshly for being so short-sighted. That said, while we're on the subject of Celestials and perception, let's talk about what's going to make the core Eternals turn against the Avengers and the X-Men and side with Druig. And that one's actually a more simple answer than many might understand. If you're not familiar with the Eternals, I would forgive you for not knowing that the Eternals have 3 principles that they must follow. Those principles are to protect the machine, which, for those who don't know, the machine is Earth. They are also to correct excess deviation, and last but not least, protect the Celestials. And it's during this third principle that the heel turn occurs. The Avengers and the Eternals, while they did work together to create this new Celestial, one of the things that Phastos brings up, and much to Makkari and Ajax's chagrin, is that they very well likely may have to destroy the Celestial to stop the final judgment. And the truth of the matter is, if they do that, for the Eternals, it would go against one of their prime directives. They're not supposed to harm the Celestials in any way, shape, form, or fashion. We saw this in the prelude to Judgment Day when it came to regarding the principle of protecting the machine. When Druig tried to send an antimatter bomb to destroy Krakoa, right as he was about to detonate it, the protocol kicked in that he was trying to harm the machine, and rather than him just simply not doing what it was he was about to do, what happened was the machine attacked back. Druig was hit with an onslaught of what can only be described as some kind of psionic attack, something that harmed him so greatly that he immediately had the antimatter bomb recalled and destroyed. It would be kind of the same thing if the Eternals were to either A, harm a Celestial, or B, allowed a Celestial to be harmed. And that's something Phastos has taken note of, is that if the Avengers and the X-Men go forward with a plan to try and destroy the Celestial, it would very likely result in the Eternals having no free will whatsoever in their actions when it comes to that moment, because if a Celestial comes under attack, the Eternals, regardless of how they feel about the situation, they no longer have any free will. They will fight tooth and nail to stop whatever is trying to hurt a Celestial. But at the same time, Phastos knows this might be the only way to handle this. Another thing that is brought up is that if the Celestial is destroyed, it could very likely result in the death of every Eternal, because if they fail in that mission, it would very likely destroy them. The force feedback of a Celestial death, it would be way more than any Eternal could bear. One of the other things to bring up here is that Phastos also believes that it's the only way forward, because maybe the Eternals should sacrifice themselves to save the rest of humanity, because technically it is a part of their mandate to protect the machine. But that gets into a lot of minutia and rigmarole that I'm not really prepared to talk about at this moment. The thing I do want to talk about, though, is the plan to destroy the Celestial, and why it's not so simple as just blowing the Celestial up. The Celestial, much like the Death Star, does actually have a weak spot, something that can be destroyed that would completely obliterate its existence. And Mr. Sinister, having learned this information from Phastos and Iron Man, he telepathically sends this to the mutant Destiny, and Destiny presents this idea before the Quiet Council, where exactly the Celestial's weak spot is, how they can attack it, and why they should attack it, right this second. The reason why Destiny is doing this is because once she received the information from Sinister, she knew what to look forward to in the future. And when she looked forward, one of the things Phastos brought up was that a newly born Celestial possesses so much raw, excessive energy that destroying it could create a massive explosion. One that would create a blast radius that starts in the Arctic Ocean, where Avengers Mountain originally was, all the way out towards Iceland, something that could also reach Russia as well as the uppermost part of North America, as far down as New York City. But if they act now, they could potentially destroy the Celestial without the resulting explosion. But it's all about timing, and since Destiny didn't see a massive explosion in the Earth's future, she knows that this is the only move they can make to save everyone. Now, the thing people are probably going to want to talk about, and it's not something I want to spend too much time on, is the votes of the Quiet Council and how it all plays out. Because one of the things you have to take note of here is that there are two members of the Quiet Council who are not around. For one, Storm is back on Mars trying to help the Brotherhood, or rather the X-Men Red, to fight back against whatever was left of Uranos' forces back on Mars. We also know that Charles Xavier has recently succumbed to the psionic injury of fighting back against such a psychic onslaught as the Unimind. So that's two Quiet Council members gone. And as far as those who voted for it, those are pretty easy. Obviously, Destiny and Mystique, they voted for it, as did Sebastian Shaw and Exodus. None of those characters are a surprise. The one who might surprise some people is Hope Summers, but to me, it wasn't really much of a surprise considering that she was raised by Cable and is pragmatic as all get out. Hope Summers is more than willing to sacrifice the few to save the many, if it's the only reasonable option on the table. She is more than willing to pull the trigger in those regards, and she is in this situation. She feels it's the best opportunity that they have to stop all of this, and she's willing to take it. Now, characters like Nightcrawler, Colossus, and Kate Pride, those are all unsurprising just for the simple fact that they all view human life with a very high regard, whether it's actual human or mutant. They don't care. They don't want to sacrifice millions to save billions if they feel there's a way to save everyone. And of course, Emma Frost, not surprising that she abstained from her vote because, well, for one, she knew that all her vote would do was deadlock anything, and all that would do is lead to inaction, which she doesn't want. And in situations that are morally ambiguous like this, Emma knows there's no real actual right answer, and in these situations, she also tends to abstain from voting. If Xavier and Storm were present, they very likely would have won, and Emma probably still would have abstained. But with the vote passed, the Krakoans are going to attack the Celestial without the Avengers or the Eternals' knowledge of it. And when they do so, this is what activates the Eternals' protocols to turn them against the Avengers and the X-Men, as I mentioned earlier. This is a situation where the Eternals, they are fighting 110 million% against their will. They don't want to be a part of this. We saw in the Death to the Mutants tie-in book that Icarus actually thinks the Eternals are the ones who should be ended. He doesn't want to kill the X-Men. We've even seen him working with Jean Grey and telling her all the things that need to happen in order to stop the Eternals under Druig's command. But yet here we see him ripping one random mutant in half, one who I'm not entirely sure who it was. I'm sure someone in the comments will let me know, and I would have taken the time to look up who it was or try and pour through various and sundry comics and images to try and see if I could piece together who it was based on the designs on their arms. But honestly, this is the third time I've had to record this video due to audio issues, so yeah, I'm not doing that. I'll leave that to the super sleuths in the comments. Y'all let me know who did it. But in the other cases, I can definitely tell you, Thena and Gilgamesh, they impaled Beast without question. They wouldn't even needed to double up on him to do that. We also see Domino get ripped in half by the Eternal Makari, and even with Domino's probability changing powers, it's no match for someone who's superhumanly fast the way Makari is. And we also see Icarus chin check Havoc into the gulag. And it's probably safe to say that Havoc's jaw is incredibly broken, if not his entire skull and his neck.
Oh, I'm hurt. Oh, my neck, my back, my neck and my back.
Regardless of how you feel about the Eternals, whether you thought their comics were lame or you thought their, the characters were lame or their powers were lame, the truth of the matter is that the Eternals, by and large, even at their weakest, are more powerful than your average X-Man. You could take the weakest Eternal and they would very likely body most of the X-Men. Their powers are just too immense. They can do too many things. They have too much at their disposal. A lot of you that have seen the MCU Eternals film, you probably think that, oh, they only have the one power. Oh, they're so weak. That movie did that team a grave disservice. And I honestly think that if you've never checked out Neil Gaiman's Eternals or Kieran Gillen's Eternals, I highly advise it. It might give you an entirely different perspective on those characters and why the X-Men are no match for them. But with that aside, in the midst of all that fighting, Jean is actually able to sneak through, and she is able to deliver the kill shot to the Celestial's core that destroys him, and then something incredibly interesting happens. Remember how earlier I stated that Destiny said that there was going to be no explosion when the Celestial was destroyed. She didn't see it in her prophecies, therefore it won't happen. However, she was right and wrong at the same time. There is an explosion that occurs, one that literally devastates all of the regions I said earlier. It devastates most of Russia, it devastates everything leading all the way up to Iceland and the top half of North America, at least as far down as New York, maybe even as low as Illinois. Everyone is destroyed in ways that are so comparable to Terminator 2's Judgment Day, where everyone is destroyed by that nuclear bomb blast and Sarah Connor's skeleton is hanging onto a chain link fence. People who were on the outer edge of the explosion were vaporized, and anyone who was standing right next to that Celestial was utterly obliterated. And then all at once, it didn't actually happen. This is when Jean realizes this was all in the Celestial's mind. The Celestial had telepathically projected everything that was going on around them. None of this was actually happening, which very likely means a lot of those deaths that occurred after Charles Xavier probably didn't actually happen. Hell, maybe even Xavier's death didn't actually happen. It's hard to say at this point, but what we do know is that the new Celestial wanted to show the entire world what would happen if they tried to forcefully stop the final judgment. And now this is going to put a huge wedge, not just between the Avengers, the X-Men, and the Eternals for now realizing that some had acted out and taken information and used it against them. Case in point, Sinister using the information Iron Man and Phastos had revealed and then using it against them and giving it to the Krakoans in an attempt to try and sneak in some kind of an attack. That's going to drive a wedge probably as much as anything else. What's going to be the biggest problem for everyone is how humanity as a whole is going to feel about Earth's mightiest heroes. The Celestial has not just shown this to the heroes. The entire world now knows, as far as how humanity feels about Earth's mightiest heroes actually doing something that pretty much sacrificed millions of lives, that is going to be something that's going to be very hard to walk back. They now have to go to plan B, and that's unity. Captain America has been doing his best to try and unite everyone, but it's not really working the way that he probably would have hoped. They're going to have to go for something a little bit bigger, and what that means, Cersei is going to have to reach up her sleeve and reveal her ace in the hole, that being one of the Eternals who also happens to be an Avenger, a character who we haven't seen since 2019's Guardians of the Galaxy #6 by Donny Cates, that being Eros, aka Star Fox. Now you're probably sitting here asking yourself, how is Star Fox going to help unite the world? I could go into a lot of granular detail about how Star Fox could do that, but I'll just say check out this video up top here and it'll tell you everything you need to know about the character Star Fox. But just for brevity's sake, I'll just say that Star Fox has the psionic ability to passively reach into another sentient being's pleasure receptors in their brain that can manipulate them into wanting to do whatever it takes to please Star Fox. This is a power that for the most part has always been used in mostly funny and fairly lighthearted ways, but over the last couple of decades, especially during Dan Slott's She-Hulk run, where it was revealed that Star Fox may or may not have used his powers to manipulate a married woman into sleeping with him and effectively ruining her marriage, it was also revealed that he very likely used the same power on She-Hulk when they slept with each other. I won't get into the minutia of that here or which way it goes, but just know that as of recent, Star Fox has largely been redeemed as a problematic character. However, the Avengers, the X-Men, and the Eternals could use his power in some way to hopefully bring the entire world together in ways that it probably never could be. Now, the truth of the matter is his power only works up to 25 feet away, so he would have to literally travel the entire world and meet with every single person that he could possibly get his hands on and try to use his power to get them to see that love is the answer, not division. But that would be very difficult for him to do with his limited power range. However, I'm of the mind that maybe possibly you could get characters like Fabian Cortez, formerly of the Acolytes, now of the Legion of X, or Cora the Burning Heart, who is of X-Men Red. You could technically get either of these characters or both of them together. It would be debatable because technically Eros is not a mutant, he's an Eternal, just like his brother Thanos. Maybe give them a boost fruit or two, and you could probably get them to use their powers in ways that have probably never been tested before. We know that both characters, typically their powers only work on other mutants, at least in the case of Fabian Cortez. Cora the Burning Heart, we don't really know 100% yet. However, if they were to maybe use the boost fruits that we're seeing in the recent issues of Marauders, they could potentially increase their abilities to levels that would allow them to affect non-mutants. This wouldn't be the most uncommon thing, considering the fact that the character Synch, who largely when he first debuted in X-Men Volume 2 number 36, it was largely believed that he couldn't use his power to sync his X gene with non-mutants. However, in 1998's Amazing Spider-Man number 437, it was shown that he was actually able to sync his X gene with Spider-Man, which led a lot of people to wonder, is Spider-Man really a mutant, or is this some other thing going on here? It was the fact that Synch is actually able to use another human's superhuman abilities, even if they aren't a mutant. He wasn't able to do the web shooter thing because, well, for one, that's a device on Peter's wrist that allowed him to do that, but he was able to replicate Spider-Man's Spidey sense, as well as all of his trademark agility and strength. And of course, as of more recent X-Men books, it's been more cemented that Synch can sync his X gene with anyone to copy any power. You can even incorporate characters like Synch and Rogue. All characters were able to borrow, to some degree, another person's abilities. I can see it where Synch and Rogue, you could maybe even tie in Hope Summers with this, even though her powers don't work on non-mutants. But once again, with a boost fruit involved, who knows? That could change everything. But any of those characters could come in and maybe possibly help spread that power across the world. Or they could just simply boost up Eros and he could just do it himself. I could easily see that happening. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, because I can sum this up pretty simply, is the information that Kieran Gillen gives us that basically solidifies that the Deviants and mutants are more related than people might have wanted to believe. Now, we did get definitive proof in Kieran Gillen's Eternals number 12 that mutants are deviants when Druig used the machine to try and determine where there were instances of excess deviation, and two places showed up. One of those being Lemuria, home of the Deviants, so duh, and the other was Krakoa. That surprised a lot of people. But it's always been debated ever since Deviants and mutants have been a part of the Marvel Comics universe, whether or not the two are related in some way. And while there's never been 100% hard definitive evidence to one way or the other, what we do know is that in this issue, Kieran Gillen cements it when the Deviants, led by Crow, also followed by fellow Deviants and Eternals allies, Ransack and Carcass, all three of those Deviants, along with an army of more Deviants behind them, step through the Krakoan Gate. Now, this is of note because only mutants can use Krakoan gates, and if the Deviants were able to use it without another mutant guiding them through it, that means that in some way, even if it's distant relation, mutants are deviants, or at the very least, spawned from them. Now, once again, this technically isn't news, but I do find it interesting that Kieran Gillen took the time to solidify this in this issue by making sure we knew that the deviants walked through those gates without anyone helping them. We've seen humans use the gates in the past, typically characters like Moira McTaggart, though when she did it, she was a mutant at the time, but then once she got depowered and turned back into a normal human, we learned that she could still do it if she covered herself in another mutant's skin, because the gate would only recognize the mutant DNA, not the human DNA underneath. So yeah, to some degree or another, deviants are connected to mutants, which means if the deviants are now the favored sons of the Celestials, that means the mutants might be too. Now, this could be huge news for a couple of reasons. One of which is if mutants and deviants decide to recognize one another as allies after Judgment Day has come to pass, this could mean that Lemuria could end up being a secondary, or rather in this case, a tertiary home, a third home for mutant kind, and that deviants could be allowed to visit and even live on Krakoa or on Arakko. This could literally be one of the greatest alliances that mutants have known in quite some time, up until Ten of Swords when they aligned with Arakko. Another thing to take a look at here is that this could also open the doorway for potential enmity between deviants and humans. This could wind up leading the Deviants to becoming targets for anti-mutant groups like Xeno and Orcus. The Deviants could easily wind up gaining the attention and the enmity of not just Moira McTaggart, but even Nimrod. But anyways, that's everything I wanted to talk about with this issue. This is a fantastic issue. Kieran Gillen is doing a really fantastic job and delivering on so many promises that were made throughout the course of the various books that he's written, as well as things that he's done in the past, paying off some things from his time writing X-Men, things that are going on with his current Immortal X-Men, as well as a lot of stuff that was going on with his Eternals run. He's paying off all of that stuff, and I know we're going to see Uranos pop up again soon because, as Druig said, things haven't gotten quite that bad yet, but considering that he's trying to use the Hex to destroy Krakoa ahead of the Judgment, he's gonna get another dose of what he got when he tried to destroy Krakoa the first time, and that this will lead to Uranos being set free. But anyways, if you want to know more about the Eternal Star Fox, check out this video up here, and if you want to know more about the Deviant Crow, check out this video down here. In the meantime, let me know what you thought about A.X.E. Judgment Day number 3. Keep it plus ultra, and sound off in the comments.